20,000 sailors, 2,000 ships, trapped, and America just sent in the military to force them out, whether Iran likes it or not. Before anything else, you need to understand why this tiny body of water is shutting down the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, sitting between Iran and Oman. And through that narrow gap flows roughly 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas, 1/5 of the planet's energy supply through a choke point, barely wider than some city limits. When the US and Israel launched airstrikes on Iran earlier this year, Tehran retaliated by closing the strait. Ships stopped moving. Captains refused to sail into a war zone. The International Maritime Organization now estimates 20,000 sailors on 2,000 vessels are stranded in the Gulf, running low on food, fuel, and water. At least 10 seafarers have been killed in 19 attacks since the conflict began. This is the crisis Project Freedom is trying to solve. Section 2. What is Project Freedom? On Sunday, May 4th, Trump announced the operation on Truth Social. He called it a, quote, humanitarian gesture, saying ships from innocent countries were trapped through no fault of their own, and the U.S. would guide them out safely. But look at the military assets behind that humanitarian gesture. 15,000 U.S. service members, guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, multi-domain unmanned platforms, that's military drones. It launched Monday morning. Within hours, U.S. destroyers USS Truxtun and USS Mason transited the strait under a sustained barrage of Iranian small boats, missiles, and drones backed by F-16 fighters and Apache helicopters. The U.S. sank 7 Iranian fast attack boats. Iran struck a South Korean cargo ship. Trump's warning was clear. Any interference from Iran would be, quote, dealt with forcefully. And he told Fox News that Iran would be blown off the face of the earth if it attacked U.S. forces. Iran did not stand down. The commander of Iran's armed forces warned that any foreign military, especially the U.S., will be attacked if it approaches the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi dismissed the entire operation on X, writing, quote, Project Freedom is Project Deadlock. And they backed those words with action. Iran struck several vessels in the strait on Monday. They set a UAE oil port on fire, the first attacks on the UAE since the ceasefire began last month. They also claimed, falsely, according to CENTCOM, that they hit a U.S. vessel with missiles near the port of Jask. Iranian lawmaker Ibrahim Azizi called Project Freedom a direct violation of the fragile April 8th ceasefire, saying, quote, the Strait of Hormuz will not be managed by Trump's delusional posts. The ceasefire that was already barely holding is now hanging by a thread. Step back from the geopolitics for a second, because behind each of those 2,000 ships is a crew of real people. Sailors from the Philippines, India, Ukraine, Egypt, ordinary workers who had nothing to do with this war, stuck in the middle of it. The IMO's Maritime Safety Director said flatly, there is no precedent for the stranding of so many seafarers in the modern age. Many ships are critically low on food, fuel, and fresh water. Oil tankers, bulk carriers, cargo vessels, even cruise liners, all frozen. The IMO has pleaded with all sides to de-escalate so crews can be safely evacuated. Even as this video goes live, a tanker off Fujairah was struck by unknown projectiles. Crew safe, but barely. Shipping CEO Angad Banga put it plainly, tens of thousands of civilian seafarers operate under risks they did not choose, and global trade depends on them. This is the human reality Project Freedom is supposed to address. Experts are deeply skeptical, and they have specific reasons. Retired Marine Corps specialist Jonathan Hackett told Al Jazeera that the U.S. has shifted goalposts from regime change and dismantling Iran's nuclear program to just trying to get ships out of a strait. He also raised a brutal math problem. There are only about a dozen U.S. Navy vessels capable of defending shipping. Before the war, more than 100 ships transited the strait daily. The math simply does not work. Then there's the mine problem. Iran planted naval mines in the strait. The U.S. no longer has dedicated mine-sweeping ships. Clearing those mines could take weeks or months. Tim Huxley, chairman of Mandarin Shipping, said bluntly, "The strait is still incredibly hazardous. I expect most ships will avoid transit until both sides come up with something more concrete." The bottom line from shipping CEO Bjorn Højgaard: it takes both sides to unblock, not just one. Project Freedom alone can't solve this. So let's talk about what day one of Project Freedom actually looked like, because it was not the smooth humanitarian convoy Trump described. Pre-war traffic through Hormuz was 120 vessels per day. That gap tells you everything. Here's what those two ships faced: Iranian cruise missiles fired at the U.S. destroyers, shot down; a swarm of Iranian fast attack boats charging the convoy; U.S. Apache helicopters sank 6 of them; F-16 fighters in the air; drones tracking every movement. Admiral Cooper called it a, quote, tactical success. Retired Lieutenant General Karen Gibson agreed, but added that Iran only needs to keep presenting the perception of risk to keep commercial traffic away. She said, quote, "Commercial confidence is really the center of gravity." Iran's Navy, meanwhile, claimed they prevented U.S. ships from entering the strait, which CENTCOM flatly denied, calling it propaganda. Both sides are now fighting a narrative war on top of a shooting war. Friday, May 8th is the next key deadline when the situation gets reassessed. Here's the part of this story that isn't getting enough attention. There is a diplomatic track running in parallel to the military one. Iran submitted a 14-point proposal to end the war, calling for a full ceasefire within 30 days, sanctions relief, and U.S. withdrawal from the region. Trump said he'd reviewed it, but couldn't imagine accepting those terms. He fired back on Truth Social that Iran had, quote, not yet paid a big enough price for what they have done. But behind the scenes, Pakistan is playing mediator. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed on X that talks are making progress with Pakistan's gracious effort, and that a U.S. counterproposal had been received and was under review. Here's what makes this so delicate. The moderate faction inside Iran wants a deal. The hardliners want to hold the strait as leverage. Project Freedom tips that internal balance. Every U.S. warship in the strait hands the hardliners a rallying cry. Iranian FM Araghchi put it plainly: there is no military solution to a political crisis. Whether diplomacy wins before a miscalculation triggers something far worse, that is the real race happening right now. Here's why this matters to you, even if you've never heard of the Strait of Hormuz before today. 20% of global oil and gas flows through that narrow channel. China gets 1/3 of its oil through there. Japan's prime minister has already said the crisis is having an enormous impact across the Asia-Pacific. When this strait is blocked, energy prices rise worldwide, and higher energy costs ripple into food prices, shipping costs, and the price of everything you buy. As of today, May 5th, fighting is still happening. Trump hasn't confirmed whether the ceasefire is even still in effect. The situation is being reassessed this Friday, May 8th. We are watching in real time as two nuclear-adjacent powers test each other in one of the most critical waterways on Earth. Whether Project Freedom becomes a historic breakthrough or a catastrophic miscalculation, we'll know very soon. Subscribe, drop your thoughts below, and share this. People need to understand what's happening. I'll see you in the next one.